Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you to one of the, I started to say inmates, that's not right, residents of Shaco, Mississippi, uh, where a lot of very interesting people live. And I'd like to introduce you to one of the most interesting out here, in my opinion, which I tend to value very highly. His name is Robert Hester, Dr. Robert Hester. Um, he is a professor at the University of Mississippi Medical School. He is married to a physician and instructor, Marion Wofford, Dr. Marion Wofford, who also is at the University of Mississippi Medical Center and is not only an outstanding doctor, she is a lovely person inside and out. He and I share one thing, is both of us married up. Welcome, Robert, to Richie's Roost in Shaco. I've been looking forward to this for a long time, and I've been promising a lot of folks you were coming on, so they're expecting.
Thank you
this,
very much,
okay?
Jim. I appreciate it.
Well, first of all, what we want to do is kind of introduce you to the folks out there. You originally, you were born in Starkville, Mississippi, right?
I was born in Starkville, Mississippi, almost 69 years ago. I am the oldest of four. My sister Lynn, my brother Charles, and my brother Richard. My dad, Leslie Hester, married a young lady, Margaret McMahon. They were married for over 50 years. They've since both passed on. Dad was a professor of aerospace engineering at Mississippi State University. I went through the public school system there. When each of the kids decided to go to college, Dad told us that if he was going to pay for it, we all had to get a degree in engineering. In engineering, yeah. So I was interested in biology, but at the time there was started a program up there called biological engineering. So I got my degree in that. My sister actually got her degree in aerospace engineering. She followed my dad. Charlie got his degree in industrial engineering, and Richard got his degree in agricultural engineering.
Well, let me ask you this: what was his rationale for requiring all four kids to go to engineering school? And I know he was an engineering professor.
Well, I don't think he required it if he was going to pay for it.
Okay.
So I guess it was sort of required. I think he felt like it teaches us how to solve problems, and that was what we would be doing throughout. What he expected we would be doing throughout our life was we were working on things, solving problems. He had a full machine shop. He had a full woodworking shop. We fixed cars. We fixed motorcycles. We did electrical wiring of the house. I hung sheetrock. So we did a lot of things growing up, and I think it proved to be valuable for all of us both in our lives and in our careers.
You know who that sounds like, and we'll get into that a little later. You know who that sounds like?
Not sure who you're looking at.
I'm looking at one of your mentors in the medical school.
Dr. Arthur Guyton.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
My son, talked about him all the time. He was one of his heroes, and that's exactly the kind of thing he required of his kids. Right?
Yes, he did. So when I finished my BS, I looked to go to graduate school, and at the time there was a joint program between the University of Mississippi Medical Center and Mississippi State in biomedical engineering. I did a year of graduate work in mechanical engineering, then came to Jackson to the physiology department to go to graduate school. I recently had to give a talk sort of along this same line about my career, and I make a comment that physiology, Dr. Arthur Guyton, who was world famous, he passed away back in the late 80s, ran a very rigorous program. And the faculty there had gone on, the vast majority have gone on in leadership positions in national organizations. But one of the things when you're taking physiology, I took that with the first year medical students, you were required to get an A. So an A was a 94. It's not your current 90, it was a 94. Well, I got a 93. And I was told by Dr. Aubrey Taylor, who went on to be the chair of physiology at South Alabama, that I could no longer continue in the graduate program.
All right, hold it right there. Hold it right there. You actually teach a physiology course now.
I teach
right?
in the medical physiology course now.
Okay.
Yes, correct.
Would you explain what is meant by physiology?
Physiology is basically the study of the human body, how things work, how your heart works, how your kidneys work, how they all interact together. If you're a neurophysiologist, you understand how the brain works. If you're a pulmonary physiologist, you study how the lungs work and how your breathing works. What we tend to do is look at it, what's considered integrated physiology, try to understand how everything fits together, and particularly disease states, high blood pressure, heart failure, things like that, diabetes are things that we study.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Back to your thought.
So Dr. Taylor told me that I was not going to be allowed to continue in the program. But he said you could go talk to Dr. Guyton when he gets back in town next week. So I went and talked to him, and he said, you can stay in the program, but you have to retake physiology and get an A. I got a 93 the second time. So the options were at the time that I could basically be tested in an oral presentation to have some of the leaders in the field of physiology quiz me to see my knowledge base. And they agreed that I had sufficiently learned the material, so I continued on into the physiology program and got my degree several years later. Usually what happens when you get your PhD, you go do what's called a fellowship afterwards. It's like a medical fellowship. You go someplace else and learn different technologies, different techniques. And so I left and went to the University of Virginia, worked for a really great guy, Brian Dooling, for 3 years. And then Dr. Guyton hired me back in the Department of Physiology in 1985. And as of Thursday, I have been there 37 years.
Well, let me say this. Had 93 been failure back when I went to Ole Miss, I would not have a college degree right now. I can promise you. 93 failure at 93 is not the norm.
Not the norm, yeah. Yes, and at the time I was like, why did they pick a 94 as that? But I think they had very high standards, and I'm proud that I managed to basically take the course twice and then go and have orals before I was supposed to and be able to continue the program and get my PhD.
No question. Now this was sort of a new program that you got into at the university.
Basically, I have my PhD in physiology. The officially diploma says PhD in biomedical engineering, and I think I may have been the second person that went through it. Through the program. There's a gentleman, Tom Coleman, that may come up a little bit later on in the discussion. He was an electrical engineer at State and got his PhD in the program. So that was the program. It's really disappeared because there just wasn't a large number of students that wanted to do engineering and then come back to the medical center and go through the physiology program.
Well, when you went through that program, you had to go back another year to get another year of what, electrical engineering?
I did mechanical engineering. I did not do a thesis. I did 24 hours, so I took basically a year of courses at the beginning at State. So I did not leave Starkville after I graduated. I spent 1 year there taking coursework, and then I moved that summer to Jackson to go to graduate school in the physiology department.
Okay, and Dr. Guyton at that time was beginning to work on a project, physiology.
It had been going on for several years. So as I mentioned, Tom Coleman, sad to say Tom passed away last year. Tom was actually from Rochester, New York, and he came to Jackson because of Arthur Guyton. And he had went through the same program, and he was trained as an electrical engineer, and he started trying to put together a series of mathematical equations that described how the human body worked.
Mathematical equations
mathematical equations.
to show how the human body works?
Yes.
Wow.
And some of it were what I would consider relationships. They might be a curve, they might be a linear line. And he published that work in 1972. It was part of Tom Coleman's dissertation work, and he published it in 72. And he stayed on at the faculty until he retired several years ago. The computer program, he continued working with it on and off over the years. He moved to a large mainframe computer, and then he developed a model for, when we've gone through the progression of going from big computers to desktop computers to laptops to everything else. So he moved into a Windows version of this program, and it continued to develop it. We got some money, some National Science Foundation money several years ago to allow us to expand it. And so that's what I'm working on. That's what the majority of my focus is right now, is working on this computer simulation.
Well, let me try to clear up something in my own mind. Now, you've met my son.
Yes.
And you all talked about simulations of different types. Now,
correct.
He started the simulation program at the Portsmouth Hospital in Portsmouth with the Navy. But this is a different type of thing where they were actually using in the residency program, for lack of a better word, mannequins.
Yes, correct.
That have been programmed to react to certain instances, so that if a doctor or a resident gave somebody a shot and it killed them, it didn't really kill them. It was a mannequin, thank goodness.
Yes, that's correct. And so those are things that are used a lot in terms of training. Basically, how do you give the drugs? How do you put a tube down somebody's throat if they cannot breathe? And going back a little bit, I was working on the program. I had sort of taken over development of the program, and I'd actually gotten a phone call from a lady in D.C. that said, "Oh, we would like to talk to you about using your model, because we had to." This was particularly after 9/11, because they were trying to figure out how to better train people to deal with trauma. It didn't work out with them, but it got me in a different environment in terms of looking at people that were doing simulation, predominantly for training first responders, things like that. I ended up meeting a guy, Jay Anton, out of a company called IVIR out of Florida. I have been working with IVR for at least the last 10 years. We currently have a Department of Defense project that is actually developing a simulation environment that's all virtual reality. So we provide the physiology. There's a couple other companies that are involved with this to do all the virtual reality stuff. So you'll be looking into your goggles, and there's the patient there, and there's all the stuff you have to do for the treatment. So that's what we're working on. One of the projects we're working on right now.
All right, now correct me if I'm wrong, but the way I understood what you were talking about, your project now, is that the human body is made up of incredible numbers of nerves and cells and all of this stuff, right? And every one of us is different. Right?
Correct. Yeah.
Every one of us. That's billions of people that are different. Now, the question is, if somebody reacts to a particular drug, how would that affect somebody else who is different or has the different drug for different types of people? How in the world do you put all this stuff together, Robert?
So you're leading me into something else, which is, and again, for everybody, this was not a setup. So you're true about that. Is if the model, if I take the base version of the model, and I can run a year in the life of the person, I can make them eat, I can make them exercise, I can put them at different environments. And yes, I can get a response over that particular person. But you're correct is that we are all different from each other. So how do you go about looking at that? So the other area we've gotten into from the simulation standpoint, which will come back to this variability, is that we've been interested in doing clinical trials. Basically, a company comes to us and says, we have this treatment option. Can you simulate that treatment in a particular disease, such as high blood pressure? And we said, yes, we can do that. And then they said, okay, but we want to look at it for for a population of patients. How do you simulate that? So it's actually relatively straightforward to generate a different person. Um, and I'm going to go to a very simple mathematical equation. If you draw a line, the equation of that line is y, which is the y-axis, is equal to m times your x value plus b. So it's basically, if you draw a line, there's a slope of the line, and m and b depend on your slope and where it intercepts. So what happens if you change m just a little bit? You get a different shape of your line. What if you change b a little bit? What if you change both of them? So basically what we have done is we've developed a technology that we can basically randomly change all of the what are the M and B's that are in the model that we have. And there are probably 3,000 of those. We can randomly change each one of them. And when you run a simulation, you have a different response to a treatment than you did before. So basically the idea is we are creating virtual patients. It's relatively easy to do. We've developed the technology so it's all done on Amazon servers. And we can basically generate people that we're actually finishing a project right now that we probably generated 5,000 patients that had high blood pressure, and we gave 3 different treatments, and we can look to see which ones respond and which ones didn't respond.
This sounds to me like an ongoing thing that never ends.
It is. The next step of this is can we match an individual model to an individual patient, or come close to that? So we're actually, and let me diverge just a little bit to get full disclosures. Probably about 10 years ago, I started a company. I actually licensed this from the University of Mississippi Medical Center. Most of the work is currently being done by my company, though I have a colleague at university that's doing his own basic research. So it's relatively straightforward. We have developed a large infrastructure that we do to be able to generate these virtual populations. If you want 50,000 virtual patients, give us a week or 2 and we can provide you with all those data. And we can look at that person's lifespan of a year, 2 years, 3 years, and tell you what happens every minute, every hour of the day in that time frame. The challenge is, how do we match it up? How would you match my responses, my data from me to that particular patient? So what we have is some de-identified human data. There's no record as to any other way to figure out what it is. And we're almost finished with, we're testing out a procedure where we can actually match a virtual patient with a de-identified group of patients. So basically, it has maybe have their blood pressure, it does have their medications, it has their heart rate, any other lab values. Can we end up matching those things? So it's using some higher level mathematical skills, some artificial intelligence and machine learning to be able to match a virtual population with a real population.
Let me interject something right
Okay.
here, just a second.
Okay.
This is probably the first time you've heard this, but after your and my son's conversation at our house over the dinner table one night, after you left, now my son does not harbor fools, okay? And he is very careful with any compliments he had. When y'all left, and he looked at me and he said, "That guy is really smart."
Well, let me say this is, I think I have common sense. I'm lucky with, I've worked with some very good people over the years. Tom Coleman was just absolutely fabulous. I have a guy now that works for my company. He goes by Drew Pruitt, lives in Madison, has a PhD in mathematics, absolutely phenomenal. Knows all the machine learning. I don't understand that stuff, but he's the smarter one in terms of the mathematics. former graduate student of mine, John Clemmer, is now on the faculty at University of Mississippi Medical Center. He is not involved with my company, but he's doing very similar stuff in terms of computer simulation. And that's from a research standpoint, not from a commercial standpoint, from a research standpoint. So I've been lucky to have lots of people that are really smart. Again, I don't know that I'm consider myself really smart. I think I have a little bit of common sense. I think I can direct people and pull out their important skill set and put them in the right places. So
right, just your everyday common biomedical engineering PhD type.
Well, it's I will tell you is Drew gets to talk about stuff and I'm just like my eyes glaze over, just because the level of mathematics from the time I took it years ago, and then I've spent 30 something years studying physiology, which is a lot more biology and not necessarily the mathematics. And Drew comes in, it brings a totally different skill set in terms of the mathematical aspect of everything.
Well, we're going to veer away from this just a little bit.
Okay,
Let me tell you that when I drive by your place down there on Barnes Road, I may see you on a tractor with a front end loader, clearing land. And I understand now. Actually, I stopped by and looked at it the other day. You've got a sawmill on your place that is cutting lumber from trees down during Katrina or whenever it was, right?
Yeah, we had a March of 2020, which was right after COVID started. There was a storm came through here. It hit Gluckstadt, which is about 15 miles away, and then for some reason it just dropped down on our property. Because if you drive around the rest of the area, you don't see the damage that you saw on our property.
That make you nervous?
Yeah, I'm not sure what a higher being might be doing. Might be looking at me. I remember my wife and I woke up that morning, and it was March. I think it was somewhere around the 20th, and I remember I heard hail on the roof, and I'm going, that's a little strange. And so I got up early that morning, and one of the trees on the driveway had fallen down parallel to the driveway, and I said, oh, that's not a problem. I can get out and get the tractor and move it out of the way. And then I walked out to the street, and it was just like one tree after another across the road. It took us about 4 days to get electricity. We've since now got a generator. And so we ended up getting rid of the pine trees, but we still had lots of trees that were there. So the sawmill came by from basically someone you sent to me to help work on the property. Is just a very interesting gentleman, Glenn Parker. So we had talked about we needed to build a small barn to be able to put all of our equipment in and keep it, protected from the weather. So Glenn and I got to talking about, well, we should probably cut the logs that are on the property and put them to good use rather than just let them rot away. So then Glenn calls me up and says, oh, I found a sawmill for you to buy. And so we're negotiating in terms of he's going to end up with it after a period of time. But so yes, we have a sawmill, and we have cut a lot of pine. We've cut a lot of poplar. We have cut used telephone poles to 6-inch square, 9-foot, 10-foot post, which will support everything. We've cut some cedar, and we're probably not even 10% of the way of all the trees that we have on our property that have to put to good use one way or the other. So,
well, Perry and I stopped by there and watched them working not too long ago, and of course Glenn showed us what he was doing, and it's a very interesting operation. You're going to have a lot of lumber.
I will have a lot of lumber. Yeah, I will have a lot of lumber.
Well, one other thing, in addition to all of your tractor work and your bush hogging and clearing, you might tell us a little bit about your bicycle riding, which is sort of unique, to say the least.
So when I moved to Jackson in 1976 to go to graduate school, I ended up going to, it was actually the bike rack in South Jackson. And I got my first good bicycle, reasonably good bicycle. And I started riding, and then triathlons came along, and I'm not a good swimmer. I'm an average runner, but I could do fairly decent on the bicycle. So I ended up doing that for a period of years. Moved to Virginia. Charlottesville was very hilly. I did a lot of cycling there, did some triathlons, moved back here. And it was a little bit on and off with the cycling from 85 when I first moved back here till probably mid 90s, on and off. And probably personal life got divorced in 99 and got more into cycling there. I was living out in Clinton, where I was living, I could walk out the door and just go for a ride. And it was a good time for me to reflect on everything and when you're off by yourself. And then I got into a group of people around here that some fairly serious riders, and particularly my own age. It wasn't like I was riding with 20-year-olds, but I was riding with guys that were late 40s, early 50s, and is now gone into the late 60s. Um, Over the years, I've had a great group of people to ride with. I'm just going to mention a few. Clifford Ammons is a local attorney with Watkins Eager. We've been riding together for like the last 10 years. Louis Harkey is a retired neurosurgeon. Spent a lot of time riding with him. Right now, the two guys I predominantly ride with are Jim Wynn, that's a transplant surgeon, and Bob McGuire, who's an retired orthopedic surgeon. So there's a bunch of things that have started. I got into mountain biking. Marion keeps talking to me about how many bicycles. I have too many bicycles, so that's another reason to have a big old barn, is to put the bicycles in it. Mountain biking, I've done lots of things with mountain biking. Um, 2017, I had a friend of mine. He grew up with Marion. He lives in Colorado. He said, "Oh, you need to come do this Ride to Rockies. 6 to 7 days riding through the Rocky Mountains." So as of whatever, third week in June, I finished my fifth time. We rode Jim Wynn, transplant surgeon, has done this with me 3 times. We drive out there. We ride for, this time was 6 days. We rode 411 miles. We rode over Independence Pass, which was 12,100 feet. We rode up to Loveland Pass and over it, which was right at 12,000 feet. I think we went over the Continental Divide 5 times this year. And it was a great, you get to meet an interesting group of people, see some of the same people every year. They're really fast riders. The amazing thing is the day we were riding up to Independence Pass, I passed 2 guys that were paraplegics that were pedaling with their arms.
Oh, man.
And I'm just impressed with people that do that. So I still do mountain biking. I'm actually going back out to Colorado. This is sort of the trifecta summer. I'm going the end of July to try to do what's called the Leadville Stage Race. It's 3 days, 40 miles first day, 20 the second, 40 the third. The turnaround is on the second day at 12,600 feet. And that's what they do that one. And then in August, Jim Wynn and Louis Harkey and his wife Allison, we're supposed to be going to Steamboat Springs for a gravel race. The big thing now is riding on gravel roads. I was just reading an article this morning about the big interest in gravel. Part of it is you see places you've never been before. Part of it is you don't worry about cars. Not a whole lot of cars drive on gravel roads, and that's it. So I'll go to Steamboat Springs. I did it last year, plan on doing it this year. I just got a notice that there's what's called the, I guess, Ordinary Epics. A local guy, Jason Shearer, puts on a 4 series gravel races, four gravel races that are a series. Every other weekend starting in January. It's first one's in Oxford, second one is in Camp Shelby, third one is in Ackerman, and fourth one is in Bentonia. And it actually finishes at the the last blues juke joint in Mississippi. So it's a great group of people. This year I've done a gravel race up in Greenwood, which was great. So it's uh, it drives Mary a little crazy because I'm enjoying this. Uh, uh, she actually said, "Well, you need to say why you do this." And I've got great friends. Excuse me a little bit. Uh, at some point in time, you're gonna get to where you can't do this. I want to make that time as long as possible where I can't do this. I enjoy the physical activity. I enjoy the camaraderie. I enjoy the places. Most of the time, I enjoy what I'm doing. There's sometimes it's been very hard. It's been very challenging. It things don't work out right in terms of you don't feel good that day. And I jokingly say that Camp Shelby is very interesting. They do a great job down there, but it's always interesting. You ride along, and there's a sign to the right that says "Do not enter unexploded ordnance." So you got to be careful about where you get off the road. But it's a great group of people, all ages, males, females, black, white, Hispanic. Everybody gets out there, and they just have a great camaraderie in terms of riding, cycling.
Well, the first thing I remember about hearing you about bicycle, you just got on a bicycle one day and rode to Mississippi State. It started with 117 miles just because.
Uh, yes, it was. I rode with a friend of mine, Ricky Venturini, and he had a son at State, and there was a football game going on, and I told my wife, I said, I just need to do this. So we went up the trace and found some back roads and made it up to Starkville. I'm actually entered in as a team in October, first week in October, which is there's a ride called the Natchez Trace 444, which they're start in Nashville and finish in Natchez. And it starts on Friday, and you go as fast as you can to get to Natchez. 444 miles. We did it, several of us did it a couple years ago as a 4-person team. It took us 25 hours. You're riding at night, which is interesting, riding at night on the trace, because you see all sorts of little animal eyes on that. So it's one of these things that it's just, I'm not good at it. I mean, I'm not very fast, but I just am a little bit persistent, and I want to continue to try adventures.
Well, I guess because it's their type of thing, and rather the reason why Perry and I went and did the skydive, same type of.
Yeah, I'm not going to do the skydiving. I will not do the skydiving.
I'm not going to ride a bicycle 400 miles either, so we'll average all of this out. Yeah. Well, look, just for folks who might want to take another, we're going to get off of that for a second, but we need to go back. You did a TED presentation on YouTube some time ago.
Yeah, it was a TEDx talk that was done downtown. It basically talks about our computer simulation.
Well, that might be interesting for some folks to see. What they go to YouTube and then they can go to the TED thing, and then what is the channel?
If they just do a search on me, Robert Hester, and they'll get that conversation, that presentation.
And that might give you all an idea of the complexity of this thing that he's been trying to work on for forever. Yeah. Well, Robert, we have covered a lot of stuff, including bicycles and sawmills, in addition to all of the stuff going on at the medical center. So probably wrap this up, and I really appreciate you coming by.
Well, I appreciate that. I would just say, I've been very blessed. I've had lots of friends. I've had lots of very good colleagues over the years that I've worked with. And you're, I guess, how long I've been out here now is 14 years, but I'm not sure when we met. But you've ended up being a very good, you and Perry have been very good friends.
Well, I appreciate that. And of course, the feeling is obviously mutual. So we'll continue that, and we'll continue this kind of life, and hopefully we'll get together again here before too long when you decide on your next adventure.
I'm already thinking about that one.
I figured you probably were. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.